The red sun of Kethera Prime was setting fast, painting the rocky plains in shades of blood and copper. Hannah moved carefully through the broken settlement, her scanner held out in front of her. The device beeped softly as it recorded data about the local wildlife. She was supposed to be studying the hunting patterns of night predators, not walking through a massacre. The Vreln settlement was small, maybe 20 buildings at most. Now it was just ruins and smoke. Hannah had seen the damage from her survey ship and landed to investigate. Her boots crunched on broken glass and scattered belongings. Whoever attacked this place had been thorough and cruel. The Vreln were a warrior species, tall and covered in thick gray scales that could stop most small weapons. They had powerful legs built for running and claws that could tear through metal. Hannah had met a few Vreln traders before. They always looked at humans with barely hidden contempt. To them, humans were soft, weak, and too small to be taken seriously. She heard a sound from one of the collapsed buildings. A whimper, quickly cut off. Hannah froze and listened. There it was again, coming from beneath a fallen wall section. She moved toward it carefully, keeping her plasma cutter ready just in case. "Hello?" she called out softly. "I'm here to help." Another sound, this time more like a hiss. Hannah knelt down and peered into the dark space under the debris. 5 pairs of golden eyes stared back at her. Cubs, Vreln younglings, probably no more than a few months old. They were huddled together, covered in dust and dried blood. One of them was barely moving. "It's okay," Hannah said, keeping her voice gentle. "I'm not going to hurt you." The largest cub hissed at her, showing tiny sharp teeth. It was trying to protect the others even though it was terrified. Hannah respected that. She slowly set down her plasma cutter and held out her empty hands. "I know you probably can't understand me," she continued, "but your settlement is gone. If I leave you here, you'll die. Let me help." She reached for her equipment belt and pulled out a protein bar. The cubs watched as she unwrapped it and broke off small pieces. She tossed one piece toward them. The cubs didn't move at first, but then the smallest one, the injured one, dragged itself forward and sniffed the food. After a moment, it took a small bite that broke the standoff. The other cubs crept forward, cautious but hungry. Hannah broke up 2 more protein bars and let them eat while she assessed the situation. The injured cub had a deep cut along its side and was struggling to breathe properly. The others looked scared but physically okay. Hannah checked her communicator. The emergency beacon she'd activated earlier should have reached the nearest Vreln outpost by now. Help would come, but it would take time. The outpost was 3 days away by ground transport, maybe less if they sent a fast ship. But there was a problem. The sky was darkening quickly, and Hannah knew what that meant. Kethera's nights were legendary throughout this sector of space. The temperature would drop to deadly levels within an hour. Electromagnetic storms made flying impossible and disabled most technology. And then there were the predators. Kethera's night hunters were efficient killing machines that could track prey across kilometers. The Vreln had a saying she'd heard once. "Only the strong see dawn on Kethera." It was their way of saying that if you weren't tough enough, the planet would kill you. Vreln warriors trained specifically to survive these nights, and even they needed proper equipment and shelter. Hannah looked at the cubs, then at her own meager supplies. She had a thermal blanket, some medical supplies, her survey tools, and the plasma cutter. The cutter's battery was already half depleted from her day's work. It wasn't much. The smart thing to do would be to find shelter for herself and wait for rescue. The cubs were Vreln, after all. Their species would come for them eventually. She could mark this location and move to safety. That was the logical choice. That was the choice that would keep her alive. Hannah looked at the injured cub again. It was watching her with those golden eyes, struggling to breathe. The others had clustered around it, trying to keep it warm with their bodies. They were babies, just children who'd watched their families die and were now facing a night that would almost certainly kill them. "Damn it," Hannah muttered. She knew what she had to do, even if it was incredibly stupid. She checked her communicator one more time. The emergency beacon's last transmission had gone out, but the device was damaged now, probably from the electromagnetic interference that was already building in the atmosphere. She wouldn't be able to call for help again until morning. Assuming she survived that long. Hannah stood up and surveyed the area. Most of the buildings were too damaged to provide real shelter, but there was one structure at the edge of the settlement that looked more intact. It had been some kind of storage facility with thick walls and a partially collapsed roof. It would have to do. "All right, listen up," she said to the cubs, knowing they couldn't understand her words but hoping her tone would convey safety. "We're moving. Stay close to me." The largest cub hissed again, uncertain. Hannah picked up the injured cub as gently as she could. It yelped and tried to bite her, but it was too weak to do much damage. She wrapped it in part of her thermal blanket and held it close to her chest. "Your brother or sister needs help," she told the others. "Follow me or don't, but I'm not leaving any of you behind." She started walking toward the storage building. After a moment, she heard the soft padding of feet behind her. The 4 healthy cubs were following, keeping their distance but staying close enough. The largest one kept glancing back at the ruins, probably hoping its parents would appear. Hannah's heart ached for them. The temperature was already dropping. Hannah could see her breath now, and the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. In the distance, something howled. It was a sound that made her spine go cold, a sound full of hunger and death. She walked faster, and the cubs followed. Night was coming to Kethra Prime, and Hannah had just made a choice that would either prove humans were tougher than anyone thought, or confirm that they were foolish creatures who didn't know their own limits. Either way, there was no turning back now. The storage building was in better shape than Hannah had hoped, but that wasn't saying much. 3 walls were solid, made of some kind of reinforced concrete that the Vreln used for their structures. The 4th wall had a large gap where something had smashed through, and the roof was missing several panels that led in the rapidly darkening sky. Hannah set the injured cub down carefully in the most protected corner of the building. The little creature whimpered but didn't try to bite her this time. The other 4 cubs filed in behind her, their eyes darting around nervously. They could sense that something was wrong with this place, with this night. "Stay here," Hannah said, even though she knew they couldn't understand her. She used hand gestures to reinforce her meaning, pointing at them and then at the ground. She went back outside and started gathering anything that might be useful. Sheets of metal from collapsed buildings, lengths of pipe, scattered tools. She dragged it all back to the storage building and started working. The cubs watched her with obvious confusion. What was this small, weak creature doing? Hannah used the metal sheets to cover the gap in the wall, wedging them in place with the pipes. It wasn't perfect, but it would block some of the wind and make it harder for predators to get in. She set up her thermal blanket like a tent in the corner, positioning it to trap what little heat they would have. Then she arranged her supplies where she could reach them quickly. The plasma cutter went on her right side, fully charged and ready. On her left, she placed the sharpest pieces of metal she'd found, along with a can of chemical irritant from her survey kit. It was meant for collecting samples from aggressive plants, but it would work on animals too, probably, she hoped. The temperature had dropped another 10 degrees. Hannah's fingers were getting numb as she worked. She checked on the injured cub and found it shivering badly. The cut on its side was worse than she'd thought, deep enough that she could see muscle tissue. If she didn't treat it soon, infection would kill the cub before anything else could. Hannah opened her medical kit and pulled out supplies. Antiseptic, synthetic skin patches, pain medication. The kit was designed for humans, but biology was biology in most cases. She'd have to guess at the dosage for a Vrelm and hope it didn't do more harm than good. She approached the injured cub slowly, talking in a soft voice. "This is going to hurt, little one, but I need to clean this wound. Try not to bite me too hard, okay?" The cub's eyes went wide as Hannah began cleaning the cut. It tried to snap at her, and the other cubs made threatening sounds, but Hannah kept working. She'd dealt with scared animals before. You had to be firm but gentle, confident but not aggressive. After a few minutes, the injured cub seemed to understand she was helping, not hurting. It lay still, trembling but cooperative. Hannah applied the synthetic skin and wrapped the wound with sterile bandaging. She gave the cub a small dose of pain medication, calculating the amount based on its body weight. Within minutes, the cub's breathing became easier and some of the tension left its small body. "There you go," Hannah said, stroking the cub's head. To her surprise, it didn't pull away. "You're tough. Tougher than you know." She pulled out her remaining protein bars and distributed them among the cubs. They ate hungrily, their fear temporarily forgotten. While they ate, Hannah allowed herself to think about the situation she was in. Humans had been in space for about 200 years now, ever since they'd discovered faster-than-light travel. They'd found a galaxy full of other species, some friendly and some not. But almost all of them had one thing in common. They thought humans were weak, and by most measures, they were right. Humans weren't as strong as the Realm. They couldn't breathe methane like the Krell. They didn't have natural armor like the Thaxions. They were just soft, pink creatures from a planet called Earth that should have stayed in their own system, but Earth had taught humanity things that other species had never needed to learn. Earth was what scientists called a death world, a planet so hostile that everything on it had to be a survivor. Humans had evolved alongside predators that could smell them from kilometers away. Diseases that killed millions and natural disasters that wiped out entire civilizations. They'd learned to adapt, to endure, to keep going when every logical reason said they should give up. Hannah thought about her grandmother, who used to tell stories about the old days on Earth, before climate correction, before the megacities, when humans still lived in small groups and had to survive using nothing but their wits and determination. "We're persistence hunters," her grandmother would say. "We might not be the fastest or the strongest, but we don't quit, ever." A loud crash outside snapped Hannah back to the present. She grabbed her plasma cutter and moved to the makeshift wall, peering through a gap in the metal sheets. Something large was moving through the ruins of the settlement. Something with too many legs and eyes that reflected the starlight. The cubs went absolutely silent, frozen in instinctive fear. Even the injured one didn't make a sound. Hannah watched the creature prowl closer. It was built like a bear from Earth, but with 6 legs and a mouth that opened in 3 directions. Its skin seemed to shimmer and change color, adapting to the shadows around it. The creature stopped about 20 meters from their shelter and raised its head, sniffing the air. Hannah held her breath. Could it smell them? Oh, most certainly. Her human scent would be unfamiliar, and the cubs would smell like prey. The creature took a step toward the building. Then another. Hannah's finger moved to the trigger of her plasma cutter. She had maybe 3 good shots before the battery died. After that, she'd have to rely on her improvised weapons and hope for the best, but then something unexpected happened. The largest cub, the one who'd been trying to protect the others since Hannah found them, moved to stand beside her. It was still small, barely reaching her knee, but it positioned itself between Hannah and the gap in the wall. The cub's body was rigid with fear, but it didn't back down. The other cubs, seeing their siblings' bravery, crept forward too. They formed a tiny line of defense, their claws extended and their teeth bared. They were trying to protect her, just as she was trying to protect them. Hannah felt something warm bloom in her chest. These cubs had every reason to fear her, to distrust her. She was an alien, a member of a species their kind viewed as inferior. But they recognized what she was doing for them, and they were trying to return the favor. "Brave little warriors," she whispered. "But let me handle this one." The creature outside let out a sound that was half roar, half scream. It charged the building. Hannah aimed her plasma cutter and fired. The bright blue bolt caught the creature in the shoulder, and it shrieked in pain and rage. She fired again, this time hitting its head. The creature stumbled and fell, twitching as the plasma burns ate through its nervous system, but the damage was done. That noise would attract other predators. Hannah could already hear answering calls in the distance. She looked at the cubs, at the darkening sky, at her nearly empty battery pack. It was going to be a very long night. The temperature was still dropping. Hannah could see frost forming on the metal sheets that covered the wall gap. Her breath came out in thick clouds of vapor, and despite her thermal suit, she was starting to feel the cold deep in her bones. The cubs were doing better than her, their thick scales providing natural insulation. But even they were shivering. More howls echoed across the plains. Different pitches, different tones. At least 3 separate packs of predators were out there now, drawn by the sounds of the fight. Hannah dragged the body of the creature she'd killed away from the building entrance. Its blood would attract scavengers, and she needed to create a perimeter that would give them some warning before the next attack. She worked quickly, using pieces of metal and wire to create noise traps around the building. Simple things that would clang and rattle if something disturbed them. She also gathered several large rocks and placed them where she could reach them easily. If the plasma cutter died, rocks could still break bones and skulls. The smallest cub, the injured one, was watching her from the thermal blanket tent. It chirped softly, a sound that seemed like a question. Hannah smiled at it despite her exhaustion. "I'm just making sure we're safe," she said. "Go back to sleep. You need rest to heal." The cub didn't understand her words, but something in her tone must have been reassuring. It curled back up and closed its eyes. The other cubs stayed alert, their heads swiveling to track every sound from outside. Hannah checked her equipment again. The plasma cutter had maybe 2 shots left. Her chemical irritant spray was full, but she had no idea if it would work on Kethra's native predators. She had 4 makeshift spears made from pipes with sharpened ends. She had rocks. She had determination. It would have to be enough. The night grew darker and colder. Hannah's communicator confirmed what her body was already telling her. The temperature had dropped to -15 degrees and was still falling. By midnight, it would reach -30. No human could survive that without proper gear, and her thermal suit was designed for survey work, not Arctic conditions. She needed heat. Hannah looked around the building and spotted some wooden crates in the corner. They would burn, but starting a fire would attract attention. Then again, freezing to death was just as bad as being eaten. She made the decision quickly. Using her plasma cutter's last bit of charge, she ignited the wood. The flames caught quickly, spreading warmth through the small building. The cubs moved closer to the fire, their scales reflecting the orange light. Hannah positioned herself between the fire and the entrance, keeping watch. That's when she heard the scraping sound. Something was climbing on the roof. Hannah looked up and saw movement through the gaps in the ceiling panels. Multiple somethings. She counted at least 5 distinct shapes moving up there, testing the weak points in the roof. These predators were smarter than the first one. They were working together. One of the creatures dropped through a gap in the roof, landing inside the building with a heavy thud. It was smaller than the first predator, built like a lizard with long claws and a whip-like tail. Its eyes locked onto the cubs immediately. Hannah didn't hesitate. She grabbed one of her makeshift spears and threw it. The weapon caught the creature in its side and it screeched in pain. Before it could recover, Hannah was on it with another spear, driving the sharpened pipe through its neck. The creature thrashed and died, but now the others knew there was prey inside. 2 more dropped through the roof. Hannah grabbed her chemical spray and aimed for their eyes. The spray worked better than she'd hoped, sending both creatures into blind panic. They crashed into each other in the walls, howling in agony. Hannah finished them with her remaining spears. She was breathing hard now, her heart pounding. 3 dead predators in less than 2 minutes. But she'd used all her spears and her spray was empty. And there were still at least 2 more on the roof. The cubs were making distress sounds, pressed against the far wall. The largest one was still trying to look brave, but Hannah could see the fear in its eyes. She couldn't blame it. She was scared too. Hannah grabbed a burning piece of wood from the fire. Fire was a universal fear among animals. She'd use that. As the next predator dropped through the roof, she shoved the burning wood into its face. The creature screamed and scrambled back, trying to escape. Hannah pressed her advantage, using the fire like a weapon, driving the creature toward the wall gap. The last predator on the roof must have decided the prey wasn't worth the trouble. Hannah heard it scrabble away across the roof panels, its claws fading into the distance. For a moment, there was silence except for the crackling of the fire and the sound of everyone breathing hard. Then the largest cub did something that surprised Hannah. It walked over to her and pressed its small body against her leg. Not seeking warmth or shelter, but offering support, comfort. "Thanks, buddy," Hannah whispered, reaching down to gently touch its head. We make a good team. But the night was far from over. Hannah could hear a new sound now, a low rumbling that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The electromagnetic storms were starting. Lightning began to flash across the sky, great bolts of purple and white that lit up the plains like daylight. Thunder followed, so loud it made the building shake. The cubs were terrified of the storms. They huddled together, making high-pitched whimpering sounds. Hannah gathered them close, wrapping them and herself in what remained of the thermal blanket. The injured cub crawled into her lap, seeking the safety of her presence. "It's just noise," Hannah told them, even though her own ears were ringing from the thunder. "It can't hurt you. I won't let anything hurt you." The storms knocked out her communicator completely. The screen went dark, and no amount of button pushing would bring it back. She was truly cut off now. No way to call for help, no way to know if rescue was coming. Lightning struck somewhere close, and in its flash, Hannah saw shapes moving outside. More predators, drawn by the fire and the smell of blood. They were circling the building, looking for a way in. She counted at least 8 of them. 8 against 1 human and 5 cubs. The odds were not good. Hannah looked at her remaining weapons. Rocks, burning wood. Her hands, her will. She'd been awake for over 30 hours. She was cold, exhausted, and injured from the fights. Her left arm had deep scratches from where one of the creatures had caught her. Her ribs ached from where she'd been thrown against a wall, but she was still alive. The cubs were still alive, and she'd promised them she wouldn't let anything hurt them. Hannah fed more wood to the fire and picked up the largest rock she could hold in one hand. She positioned herself at the entrance, ready for the next attack. The cubs watched her with those golden eyes, and in them she saw something new. Not fear or confusion, but trust. They believed she would protect them. And she would, no matter what it cost her. The predators outside began to circle closer. The longest night of Hannah's life was only beginning, and dawn was still hours away. But she set her jaw and tightened her grip on the rock. If they wanted the cubs, they'd have to go through her first. And Hannah had learned a long time ago that humans were very hard to kill. The 8 predators attacked together. They came from different directions, coordinated and intelligent. 2 hit the metal sheets covering the wall gap, trying to tear them down. 3 more climbed the walls to get to the roof. The last 3 charged straight at the entrance where Hannah stood. She threw her rock at the first one, catching it in the head with enough force to crack bone. The creature stumbled and fell. The second one leaped at her, claws extended. Hannah dove to the side, grabbing a burning piece of wood and jamming it into the creature's belly. It shrieked and thrashed, catching her across the ribs with its tail. Pain exploded through her side, but Hannah didn't let go. She pushed the burning wood deeper until the creature went limp. The third predator was smarter. It feinted left, then went right, trying to get past her to the cubs. Hannah lunged and caught it by the tail, using her body weight to drag it back. The creature spun and slashed at her, cutting deep into her shoulder. Blood ran hot down her arm, but Hannah didn't let go. She couldn't let it reach the cubs. The largest cub suddenly appeared beside her, launching itself at the predator with a fury that surprised everyone. Its claws, still small and not fully developed, raked across the creature's eyes. The predator roared in pain and confusion, giving Hannah the opening she needed. She grabbed another rock and brought it down on the creature's skull again and again until it stopped moving. Behind her, she heard metal tearing. The predators on the roof had broken through. 2 of them dropped into the building near the cubs. The other 3 cubs formed a defensive circle around their injured sibling. Hissing and clawing despite their terror, Hannah's vision was getting blurry from blood loss and exhaustion, but she moved anyway. She threw herself at the nearest predator, using her body as a weapon. They crashed into the wall together. The impact drove the air from her lungs, but she held on, scratching at its eyes, biting whatever she could reach. The predator tried to shake her off, but Hannah locked her legs around its body. The largest cub attacked the second predator, showing the same fierce protectiveness Hannah had shown them. The other mobile cubs joined in, overwhelming the creature with their numbers. They were learning from her, copying her tactics. Use whatever weapons you have, fight dirty. Never give up. A massive lightning bolt struck so close that Hana could feel the electricity in the air. The building's metal roof acted as a conductor, sending sparks flying everywhere. One of the predators on the roof was hit directly and fell, dead before it landed. The surviving predators on the roof fled, their fear of the storm finally greater than their hunger. But the storm was getting worse. Much worse. The electromagnetic pulses were so strong now that Hana could see blue lightning dancing along the metal walls. The building was becoming dangerous. If another bolt hit this close, they could all be electrocuted. "We have to move," Hana said, coughing. Blood came up with the cough. That wasn't good. She must have broken something in her last fight. She gathered the cubs, putting the injured one on her back and herding the others toward the door. The largest cub seemed to understand what she wanted. It helped guide its siblings, nipping at them when they hesitated. Outside, the storm turned night into a nightmare of light and sound. Rain had started, freezing rain that felt like needles on Hana's exposed skin. But she'd seen something during her survey work earlier, before all this started. A cave system about half a kilometer away. It would be dangerous getting there, but staying here was certain death. Hana stumbled forward, keeping the cubs close. The injured cub on her back whimpered but held on tight. Her legs felt like they were made of lead. Every step was a battle against her body's desperate need to stop, to rest, to give up. A predator emerged from the darkness, attracted by their movement. Hana barely had the strength to lift her arms in defense. But before it could attack, lightning struck it directly. The creature's body jerked and smoked, then fell. Hana didn't question the luck. She just kept moving. The cubs were struggling too. They weren't used to this cold, this fear, this exhaustion. But they stayed with her, following their protector even though every instinct probably told them to hide. Hana's foot caught on a rock and she fell hard. The injured cub tumbled off her back with a frightened cry. For a moment, she lay there in the freezing mud, her body refusing to respond to her commands. She'd been awake for over 40 hours. She'd fought off at least a dozen predators. She'd been clawed, bitten, and beaten. She was bleeding from multiple wounds. Her body had reached its limit, but then she felt small bodies pressing against her. The cubs were trying to lift her, pushing at her with their heads, making urgent sounds. The largest cub grabbed her sleeve in its teeth and pulled. They weren't going to let her quit. They needed her. Hana forced herself to her knees, then to her feet. She picked up the injured cub again and kept walking. The cave entrance appeared through the rain like a blessing. It was barely visible, hidden behind rocks and vegetation, but it was there. They stumbled inside just as another massive lightning bolt split the sky. The cave was dry and warmer than outside, protected from the wind and rain. Hana made it about 10 steps inside before her legs finally gave out completely. She collapsed against the cave wall. The injured cub still clutched to her chest. The other cubs gathered around her, pressing close. Hana was shivering violently now, her body temperature dropping to dangerous levels. She was hypothermic, going into shock from blood loss and possibly suffering from internal injuries. This was it. She'd gotten the cubs to safety, but she wasn't going to see the dawn. Her vision was darkening at the edges and she felt so cold, so tired. It would be easy to just close her eyes and sleep, but then the cubs did something that would be talked about for generations to come. They arranged themselves around Hana's body. Not for warmth like they'd done before, but as a protective barrier. The 4 healthy cubs formed a circle with their bodies touching, creating a living wall between Hana and the cave entrance. Their backs were to her, their faces toward any danger that might come. The injured cub, too weak to join them, curled up against Hana's chest, its small heart beating against hers. The largest cub looked back at Hana once, its golden eyes meeting hers in the darkness. Then it turned away and stood guard, watching the storm outside. They were protecting her. These alien younglings, whose species considered humans weak and worthless, had chosen to become her shield. They had learned from her that strength wasn't just about claws and scales. It was about refusing to abandon those who needed you, even when it would be easier to run. Hana felt tears on her cheeks, though she wasn't sure if they were from pain or something else. She wanted to tell them to run, to save themselves, that she wasn't worth dying for. But she couldn't make her voice work anymore. The storm raged outside, and the predators howled in the distance. The temperature continued to drop. But inside the cave, 5 realm cubs stood as a bastion around one human who'd proven that sometimes the weakest-looking creature could have the strongest heart. Hannah's eyes closed, and darkness took her. But even unconscious, she felt safe, protected. The cubs kept their vigil through the remaining hours of the night. None of them moving from their positions, all of them ready to fight anything that tried to hurt the strange creature who'd saved their lives. They didn't know if she would survive. But they knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't face death alone. The first light of dawn touched the cave entrance, painting it in shades of pink and gold. The storm had passed some time in the early morning hours, leaving the world covered in frost and ice. The predators had retreated to their dens, satisfied with easier prey. The long night of HFY Prime was finally over. Inside the cave, the cubs were still in their defensive positions around Hannah. They were exhausted, swaying on their feet, but none of them had moved from their posts. The largest cub's eyes were heavy with sleep, but it forced itself to stay alert. Its siblings were in similar states, pushing past their limits because that's what their protector had taught them. The injured cub against Hannah's chest stirred and made a small sound. Its movement seemed to wake Hannah, who'd somehow survived the night despite her injuries. Her eyes opened slowly, struggling to focus. She was still alive. Somehow, impossibly, she was still alive. "Hey, little ones," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We made it." The cubs turned at her voice, their golden eyes bright with relief. They crowded around her, making soft, chirping sounds. Even the injured cub managed a weak version of the sound. They were all still alive. Altogether, Hannah tried to sit up, but pain shot through her entire body. Her shoulder was badly infected where the predator had clawed her. Her ribs were definitely broken. She was still hypothermic and probably in shock, but they were alive. That was all that mattered. She heard a sound from outside the cave, engines, the distinctive whine of Realm military transports. Help had arrived. Commander Tayan led the rescue team personally. He'd lost his own family to raiders 5 years ago, and when the emergency beacon from this settlement had gone silent, he'd feared the worst. His team had set out at first light, expecting to find only bodies. They found the settlement in ruins, just as expected, but then they found the trail. Drag marks leading away from a partially collapsed building. Dead predators scattered around the area. Signs of a fight, of survival, of something impossible. The tracker and his team, a veteran named Bora, knelt to examine the evidence. "Commander, these predators were killed with primitive weapons, rocks, sharpened metal, fire. And there are small footprints here. Cubs. Cubs couldn't have done this," Tayan said, examining a predator's crushed skull. "This took strength and skill." "Not cubs alone," Bora said, pointing to another set of prints. "These are boots, human boots." "Small ones?" Tayan's eyes widened. "A human? Out here? Alone?" "Impossible. Humans couldn't survive a HFY night. They were too weak, too soft." Everyone knew this. The team followed the trail to the cave. What they found there would change everything they thought they knew about humans. 5 cubs stood in a defensive formation around a small human female. She was covered in blood and injuries, barely conscious, but still breathing. The cubs were watching the realm soldiers with suspicion, their small bodies tense and ready to fight despite their obvious exhaustion. "Stand down," Tayan ordered his team. He approached slowly, his hands visible and empty. "We're here to help," the largest cub hissed at him, a warning. Tayan stopped, surprised. The cub was protecting the human. Not seeking rescue from her, but guarding her. Hannah stirred, hearing the realm voices. "It's okay," she managed to say to the cubs. "They're your people. You're safe now." But the cubs didn't move. Not until Hannah gently pushed them aside did they finally step back, though they stayed close to her. Tayan watched this interaction with growing amazement. "You're the human from the survey ship," he said, his translator device making his words understandable to Hannah. "You survived the night, with cubs?" "Had to," Hannah said simply. "Couldn't leave them." Tyen's medic, a female of Realm named Jisoo, moved forward to examine Hannah. Her scanner showed the extent of the damage: broken bones, deep lacerations, hypothermia, infection, exhaustion. By all rights, this human should be dead. How? Tyen asked, the question not just for Hannah, but for the universe itself. How did you survive? Hannah looked at the cubs, who were now being checked by other medics. The injured one kept looking back at her, worried. She smiled at it despite her pain. I'm human, she said. We don't know when to quit. Tyen ordered his team to carefully transport everyone back to the base. Hannah was placed on a medical stretcher, but the cubs refused to be separated from her. They walked alongside the stretcher the entire way, the largest one occasionally touching Hannah's hand with its snout dot as they traveled. Tyen examined the trail they'd taken. The evidence of Hannah's fight was everywhere. Dead predators, improvised weapons, signs of tactical thinking and desperate courage. She'd moved the cubs through active predator territory during a storm, while injured and exhausted, and gotten them all to safety. Commander, Bora said quietly, I've seen Realm warriors die on nights like last night. Trained soldiers with full equipment. This human did it with survey tools and determination. Tyen nodded slowly. He'd grown up believing humans were weak creatures who'd gotten lucky finding space travel. But this changed things. At the base, Hannah was rushed to the medical facility. The cubs fought the staff until Tyen personally assured them that Hannah would be okay. Even then, they refused to leave the medical wing, camping outside her room while the doctors worked on Hannah. Tyen reviewed the footage from her damaged recorder. The device had been running during parts of the night, capturing moments of the battle. What he saw made his blood run cold, the human fighting with rocks and fire against creatures that outweighed her 3 times over. Her using tactics and strategy to overcome her physical limitations. Her protecting the cubs with a ferocity that rivaled any Realm warrior. Her refusing to quit even when she was clearly dying, and then the final image, the cubs forming a protective circle around her, standing guard while she lay unconscious. They'd learned from her. Adapted her lesson that protection and loyalty mattered more than individual strength. When Hannah woke up 3 days later, her body wrapped in bandages and regeneration fields, she found Commander Tyen sitting beside her bed. The cubs were there too, sleeping in a pile at the foot of her bed. They'd been there the entire time, refusing to leave. The injured one is going to be fine, Tyen said without preamble. Your medical treatment saved its life. They're all healthy now, thanks to you. That's good, Hannah said, relaxing back into her pillow. I need to know, Tyen said. Why did you do it? You could have saved yourself. Why risk everything for cubs of a species that's treated your kind with contempt? Hannah was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she said, because they were children who needed help. That's enough reason. Tyen stared at her, understanding dawning. It wasn't about species or politics or proving anything. It was simply about doing what was right regardless of the cost. My people have been wrong about yours, he said finally. We saw your physical limitations and assumed that made you weak. We didn't understand that strength comes in many forms. The largest cub woke up and immediately moved to Hannah's side, pressing its head against her uninjured hand. Hannah smiled and gently stroked its scales. What will happen to them? She asked. They'll be adopted by good families, Tyen said. But, he hesitated, the cubs have been saying something. A word in our language that they shouldn't know yet. They're calling you Shield Bearer? It's a title of great honor among our people. Hannah looked at the cubs, emotion tightening her throat. They protected me too, you know. At the end, when I couldn't fight anymore, they stood guard. They were my shield as much as I was theirs. Tyen nodded. I know, I saw the footage. What happened in that cave last night? It will be shared among my people. They need to see what we've been blind to. Humans aren't weak. You're survivors, protectors, warriors in your own way. Over. The following weeks, the story of Hannah and the cubs spread through the galactic community. The footage became required viewing in Realm military academies. Other species began reassessing their assumptions about humans. Requests came in for human personnel on dangerous missions. not despite their limitations but because of their unique approach to survival. The cubs grew strong and healthy, adopted by families who understood the honor of raising children who'd survived the Bastion night. But they never forgot Hannah. They visited her regularly, and when they grew old enough, they chose to work as liaisons between human and realm settlements. The injured cub, now named Minho by its adoptive family, grew up to become a decorated rescue specialist. When asked why it chose that path, it would touch the scar on its side and say, "Because someone once refused to leave me behind, I learned that real strength is protecting those who cannot protect themselves." And on Kethera Prime, in the cave where 5 cubs had formed a living bastion around one human, a marker was placed. It showed a simple image, a human figure surrounded by 5 Vreln younglings, all facing outward, all protecting each other. The inscription read, "They said humans couldn't survive the night. She proved that survival isn't about being the strongest. It's about refusing to break,